Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Ognis the Dragon's Lash. So Ognis is a Jun commander, and do note that it has triple red here, with one of the reds being hybrid blue, black and red, and the other one being hybrid red and green. So technically you can cast this for all red mana if you just have red. And it is a 3/3 with haste that says whenever a creature you control with haste attacks, you create a tapped treasure token. So note that is a tapped treasure token, meaning that you cannot go off with the treasure tokens immediately unless you have some way of untapping them or sacking them. So right away, we're going to have some card draw spells. There's going to be some typical card draw spells in like Bolas' Citadel, Null Profusion, Recycle, Sylvan Library, Skull Clamp. But then we also have Korvold, since this pairs very well with treasures that we're going to sacrifice. We also have Toski, Bearer of Secrets, because we're going to have a bunch of cheap creatures that have haste that Toski can use to attack our opponents, deal damage to them, and then draw cards. Skipping the combos for now, we've got our red blasts, of course. We've got a bunch of fast mana. This deck doesn't function without Ognis in play, so we want to get Ognis down as fast as possible. Also, again, note that the triple red in the cost of Ognis means that all of the red rituals make it easier to cast Ognis quicker. Then we've got cards that either have haste or grant haste. So there's multiple ways you can take this deck. You could either play a bunch of cheap creatures with haste, or you can play a bunch of cheap creatures and then ways of giving them haste. So we've got Beastcaller Savant, 2 mana, 1/1 with haste, tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, spend this mana only to cast creatures. We've got Loyal Apprentice, which will make a hasted flying Thopter token if we have our commander. So as long as we have Ognis in play, it will just make a free hasted flying Thopter every turn, and it itself also has haste. Mass Hysteria to give everything haste, along with Concordant Crossroads that does the same. Lightning Greaves. And then Phoenix Chick is one of our few, just straight up, it just has haste and doesn't really do anything else because it is a flyer and only 1 mana. And then we've got Ruby, Daring Tracker from Wilds of Eldraine. It's a 2 mana, 1/2 with haste. Whenever it attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it gets +2/+2, and it taps for red or green. So Ruby and Beastcaller Savant are basically both mana dorks that also have haste. Then we've got a bunch of straightforward Jun Lands, including Dryad Arbor, Gaia's Cradle, Urza's Saga. Some protection spells to make sure that we don't get countered, like Allosaurus Shepherd, Veil of Summer, Deflecting Swat. And then we've got our ramp. So primarily what we want to do is we want to just have a bunch of cheap mana dorks, and then we want to just give those mana dorks haste so that they can attack our opponents in great treasures. So a bunch of mana dorks, Birds, Deathrite, Delighted Halfling, Elves of Deep Shadow, etc. But we also have some treasure generating cards like Grim Hireling and Professional Facebreaker. A little bit of stacks with Collector Oof, Null Rod. Now this does counteract the ability of our treasures to be tapped for mana, but we also have just a lot of mana sources that are not artifacts. In fact, most of our mana sources are not artifacts. So it may be more beneficial, or rather it may be less detrimental to us than it is to our opponents. We've also got a little bit more stacks in Dothy Voidwalker for the graveyard, Opposition Agent for searching, and then Winter Orb importantly, because once again, we have a lot of cheap mana dorks, which means we can afford to not have our lands untapped much more than our opponents can. Fire Covenant as a one-sided sweeper, and then a few tutors, including GSZ, because it can either be a ramp spell with Dryad Arbor, or we can go find Collector Oof later, or just some other green creature. So then, how do we actually combo by making all of these treasures? Well, we've got a few ways to do this. So first of all, we've got Academy Manufactor. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure, you make all of them instead. So since we're going to be making a bunch of treasures anyway off of Ognis, may as well make more tokens. We've got Aggravated Assault. This one can just straight up combo. So if we can generate 5 mana per attack, then we can activate it to give ourselves infinite attacks. We've got Amulet of Vigor. This is important because the treasures enter the battlefield tapped, so Amulet will cause them to untap. And importantly, this is a good combination with Aggravated Assault. So if we've got our Ognis, our Aggravated Assault, and our Amulet of Vigor, as long as we have 5 creatures with haste, including Ognis, we can attack, make 5 treasures, they all untap. We spend the 5 treasures on Aggravated Assault, we untap all of our guys, get an extra combat, etc. Of course, Mayhem Devil will be good with all of these treasures that we are creating because we can sack them to deal damage. Same thing with Mirkwood Bats. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. We've got Parallel Lives, which doubles our token generation. And we've got Chatterfang, which whenever we make a token, creates a squirrel in addition to that token, so we get more tokens. It can also sack squirrels to kill things. And then lastly, Reckless Fireweaver, which is whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So the only card here that actually outright just straight up kills the opponent instantly is Aggravated Assault / it in combination with an Amulet of Vigor. But all of these other cards, while they may not exactly kill the opponent immediately, unless you already have the ability to keep taking extra combat steps. They do either provide a ton of extra tokens or deal a lot of damage. So while they don't win the game on the spot, they do add up really quickly. They're also just good value cards generally for what it is that we're doing. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to want, again, a bunch of cheap creatures, monodorks usually. And then we will use those cheap creatures to either play a bunch of expensive card draw engines that we can use to get way ahead on card advantage over our opponents, or set up a combo that involves some combination of these cards, or just attrition our opponents out of the game using Chatterfang, Academy Manufactor, Mayhem Devil, etc. And then the rest of our deck is just a bunch of, typically good Jund cards with a few stacks pieces and some value to be had. But that is basically the extent of Ognis the Dragon's Lash.